Welcome to the Lion's Share podcast, where we break down today's most impactful research and bring fresh insights from the academic frontier straight to you.
You know, I was looking at the failure rates for new ventures recently, both for those scrappy startups and massive corporate initiatives. And it's terrifying.
Oh, yeah. The numbers are completely bleak.
They really are. But what's fascinating is why they fail. I mean, it's rarely because they couldn't actually build the product.
Right.
It's almost always because they built the wrong product.
It is the classic trap. In cognitive psychology, we call it the optimist delusion.
Or the optimist delusion.
Yeah. Founders fall so deeply in love with their solution that they completely ignore the problem. They spend millions building this cathedral in the desert, convinced people will come to worship, and then, well, just silence.
And that silence is really expensive. We're talking about burning through capital and career capital and time. So today, we are doing a deep dive into lean strategy and sort of the art of venture validation.
It's a crucial topic for anyone building anything right now.
Exactly. And we're pulling from a pretty rigorous stack of research today. We've got Harvard Business Review articles by David Collins, the foundational work of Steve Blank and Eric Ries, and some really tactical frameworks on prototyping from Steve Glaveski.
The mission here for our deep dive is to figure out how to dismantle that whole build it, and they will come fallacy.
Which is so pervasive.
It is. We want to look at how you can use the scientific method to validate a business model before you engineer a single line of code.
Which is definitely easier said than done, especially if you're in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
But let's start by just clearing up the vocabulary, because in the business world, you hear lean and agile and design thinking thrown around like they're all just synonyms for moving fast.
Right, like it just means doing things quickly.
Yeah, but looking at our Module 7 source material, they're actually distinct disciplines, aren't they? With very different theoretical roots.
They are, and conflating them is honestly where a lot of innovation teams hit a brick wall. Think of it as a strategic triad. You need all three, but they serve totally different functions.
Okay, so break that down for us.
First, you have design thinking. This is the front end. It's rooted in anthropology and empathy.
So design thinking is asking, who is the human and what is the specific pain point they're experiencing?
Exactly. It operates entirely in the problem space. It's problem definition. Then once you have a handle on the problem, you move to lean.
And lean comes from manufacturing.
Toyota production system, exactly. It's a philosophy about maximizing value and minimizing waste. And in the context of a startup, waste is defined as building something nobody wants. So lean is all about validating the solution and the business model itself.
And then agile is the third piece?
Agile is the execution engine. It comes straight from software development, sprints, scrums, iterative delivery. And this is the key insight for any manager listening right now, Agile is totally useless if you're building the wrong thing.
Because you're just building the wrong thing faster.
You could be incredibly agile and efficient while driving the bus straight off a cliff.
That is such a crucial distinction. Design thinking explores the problem, lean validates the solution's value, and agile builds it efficiently.
Precisely.
So let's dig into the lean part, specifically this HBR article by David Collins on lean strategy. He identifies a massive tension that I think every founder feels.
The tension between strategy and entrepreneurship.
Right. Because classically, strategy implies a North Star, a 5-year plan, a fixed destination, a competitive advantage you defend. But entrepreneurship implies chaos and opportunism and pivoting whenever the data changes. How does Collins reconcile those two?
Well, it's a fundamental dilemma of new venture creation. Collins argues that if you have strategy without entrepreneurship, you get central planning.
Which is rigid.
It's rigid, it's bureaucratic, and it usually fails because the market moves way too fast. It's the old waterfall method of development.
But if you have entrepreneurship without strategy,
then you just have anarchy. You're chasing every single shiny object. You see this with founders who pivot every week based on one conversation.
Yeah.
Monday, they're building a crypto wallet. Friday, it's an AI dog walker.
That's not agility, that's flailing.
Exactly. So lean strategy is the synthesis. Collins proposes that you need a firm vision, the North Star, but you must be radically flexible on the path you take to get there. He introduces this concept of bounds or guardrails.
Okay, so what does a bound look like in practice?
You might say, we're going to solve the problem of urban mobility. That's the bound. Within that sandbox, you might test scooters or ride-sharing or autonomous pods. But you don't suddenly start selling organic dog food.
It creates a safe space for experimentation. You're allowed to pivot, but only within those strategic bounds.
Right.
Now let's talk about that experimentation, because Steve Blank's work is really central here. He has that famous golden rule. There are no facts inside the building.
That is the big ontological shift in this entire field. In the old days, we operated on causation. We try to predict the future and plan for it. Blank argues for effectuation. We go out, we interact, and we let the future reveal itself.
Because you cannot validate a business model at your desk.
You can have opinions, you could have beautiful spreadsheets, but until you interact with a real paying customer, you are operating on pure faith.
Which brings us to the MVP, the minimum viable product. I want to spend a moment here because this term has been abused to the point of meaninglessness in so many boardrooms.
Oh, absolutely.
Most corporate executives think an MVP is just version 1.0, but smaller.
It's buggy and half finished, so let's just call it an MVP. No, that is so dangerous. If you look at the Kauffman Founders School materials, they are crystal clear. An MVP is not a product.
It's not a product at all.
It is a test. It is a specific artifact designed to maximize learning about your riskiest assumptions with the least amount of effort.
So an MVP isn't necessarily code?
In many cases, it absolutely shouldn't be code. It could be a flyer, it could be a conversation, it could be a landing page. The goal isn't can we build, that's an engineering question. The goal is should we build it? That's a value question.
There is a really painful story in the research about Eric Ries and his company IMVU that perfectly illustrates the cost of getting this wrong. I think this case really highlights the technical founder trap.
It's a classic case study. Back in 2004, IMVU wanted to build a 3D avatar chat world. Their strategy relied heavily on network effects. They assumed, and here's the optimist illusion again, that the killer feature would be interoperability with existing instant messaging networks.
Like AOL and MSN.
Right.
And the logic seems sound. Everyone is already on AOL, so let's let them use their AOL buddy lists to chat in 3D. It lowers the barrier to entry.
Theoretically, yes. So they spent 6 months, and we're talking 18-hour days, slooping under their desks, building this incredibly complex integration. It was an engineering marvel. They finally launched it.
Absolute silence. Nobody used it.
Worse than that, actually. When they finally brought customers in for interviews, which they should have done on day one, they realized that users didn't want their existing friends to see them role-playing with weird 3D avatars.
It was embarrassing.
Highly embarrassing. They wanted to meet strangers.
So the interoperability feature, the very thing they spent 6 months engineering, was actually a negative value proposition. It made the product worse.
Exactly. That 6 months of coding was pure waste in the lean sense. The tragedy is they could have learned that in one day. They could have just put up a fake button that said invite your AOL friends and counted how many people clicked it.
That brings up a fascinating point about prototyping. If you can test a hypothesis without building the tech sub-EM, you completely change the unit economics of the startup. Let's talk about the Wizard of Oz model, specifically the Zappos story.
This is the textbook example.
It's legendary, but I want to analyze it through the lens of business model validation.
So Nick Swenmar, the founder, has a hypothesis. People are willing to buy shoes online. Now, in 1999, that was a highly risky assumption. People wanted to try shoes on.
And the traditional corporate way to test that would be to rent a huge warehouse, buy $100,000 in inventory, build a logistics backend, and launch. That's massive CapEx.
Which creates massive risk. Instead, Nick goes to a local shoe store in San Francisco. He asks the owner, "Can I take photos of your shoes? If I sell one online, I'll come back and buy it from you at full price."
So he puts up a simple website. When an order comes in, he literally runs to the store, buys the shoes, packs them himself, and goes to the post office.
He was the warehouse. He was the automation. To the customer, it looked like a seamless e-commerce experience. That's the Wizard of Oz part. But behind the curtain, it was literally just a guy running errands.
But let's look at the financials here for a second. He's buying at retail and selling at retail. He's losing money on gas and shipping. A CFO would look at that P&L and say, this is a terrible business model.
And that's exactly why traditional financial metrics often kill early-stage innovation. In the validation phase, you do not care about profit or scalability. You care about learning.
He was verifying a behavior.
Yes. He proved that people would put their credit card into a website for shoes.
Once he knew that demand was real, that the value hypothesis was actually validated, then he could build the warehouse and fix the unit economics.
Precisely. It challenges that mindset that coding is work. In the Zappos case, building a back-end system before validating demand would have been procrastination.
Procrastination disguised as work.
Coding is a comfort blanket for technical people. It feels like progress. But if you're coding something nobody wants now, you're just creating legacy debt for a product that shouldn't exist.
Speaking of not coding, the sources mention Steve Glavesky's 12 types of prototypes. Some of these are hilariously low-tech but highly effective.
They are. Take Google Glass, for example. That seems like incredibly high-tech hardware, right? You'd assume they spent years in R&D before testing the concept.
I mean, I would assume so.
The first prototype took 1 day. They used a coat hanger, a piece of plexiglass, a Pico projector, and a netbook in a backpack. They wired it up to project onto the plexiglass.
That must have looked ridiculous.
It looked absurd, but it allowed them to test the experience of having information overlaid on your vision immediately.
And then there's the smoke screen method. Dropbox is the famous one here.
Drew Houston, the founder. He needed to prove that people wanted file syncing. But building the actual tech was incredibly hard. It involved multiple operating systems. So he didn't build it.
He made a video instead.
A 3-minute video, narrated by him, full of inside jokes for the tech community, showing here's what it will do.
It was just pure vaporware.
Completely. But that video drove 75,000 people to the beta waiting list overnight. That is validation. He proved the problem resonated before he solved the technical challenges.
I want to pivot now to the corporate side, because it's easy to say move fast and break things when you're two guys in a garage. But what if you're General Electric?
The GE battery case.
Yes, the startups, the lean method source tells this incredible story about high-tech batteries that I think is essential for our listeners in larger organizations.
This is a sodium-sulfur battery case. This is crucial because it shows that lean isn't just for consumer apps. GE had this proprietary battery technology. The CEO was ready to hand a general manager, Prescott Logan, $100 million to build a factory.
$100 million, based on a forecast model.
Based on generic market research. The market for industrial batteries is growing. Therefore, we should build a factory. Standard corporate logic. But Prescott Logan did something incredibly brave. He said no.
He refused the budget. That takes serious guts in a corporate hierarchy.
He refused the factory. He told them, I don't know who the customer is yet. He took a small team and they got on planes. They treated it like a startup. They flew everywhere to talk to potential users, even to Antarctica.
Wait, why Antarctica?
They were talking to utility companies, telecom providers, anyone who needed remote power. And what they found in Antarctica versus the Arabian desert completely changed the project.
I assume the technical requirements were vastly different.
Radically different. The telecom guys in the desert needed advanced cooling systems.
Yeah.
The utility guys in the Arctic needed heavy insulation. If GE had built that standard factory, they would have produced a generic battery that fit nobody's needs.
They would have burned $100 million.
And had a warehouse full of unsellable product.
That is a staggering example of risk reduction. By spending just a fraction of the money on travel and customer development, they saved the company from a massive flop.
Exactly. They eventually built the factory, but only after they had a backlog of orders and knew exactly what specs to build. This is entrepreneurship done right.
This connects directly to the idea of the pivot. In the GE case, they pivoted their understanding of the product requirements. But I want to be precise here for our audience. What is the actual difference between a pivot and just iterating?
It's a matter of magnitude and structural change. An iteration is tuning the engine, changing a button color, tweaking the pricing by 5%, making the app load faster. You're still in the exact same path.
And a pivot?
A pivot is a substantive change to one or more core components of your business model canvas.
So if I change my target customer from stay-at-home moms to corporate IT managers, that's a pivot.
Correct. Or changing your revenue model from a one-time purchase to ad-supported. A pivot happens when your fundamental hypothesis is proven wrong.
And how do you know it's actually wrong? The sources are pretty strict about what counts as data versus just noise.
This goes right back to the optimist illusion.
Yeah.
If you ask your mom, is this a good idea? She will say yes because she loves you. If you ask a random person on the street, would you buy this before? They might say yes just to be polite. That is false positive data. It's vanity metrics.
The check is in the mail kind of feedback.
Right. Real validation comes from behavior, not opinions. Did they pull out a credit card? Did they sign a letter of intent? Did they give you their email address? You need skin in the game.
If they don't lose something, money, time, or reputation, it doesn't count.
So you aren't validating, you're just having a nice chat.
That's a really high bar. It's much nicer to just hear, great idea, and go back to coding in your basement. But I want to touch on the managerial implications of this, because if you're a middle manager at a big company or even a founder with impatient investors, there's a lot of pressure to just execute the plan.
That is the traditional model. We call it the waterfall model. You write a plan, you execute the plan, and if you fail, you get fired. In the lean world, and this is a massive cultural shift, you have to fire the plan, not the person.
Fire the plan. I like that.
If the data shows the plan is wrong, realizing that is a victory. If Prescott Logan at GE had been judged on, did you build the factory on time, he would have failed. But because he was judged on, did you validate the business, he succeeded. You have to reward learning.
That requires a huge shift in mindset. You have to admit you don't know all the answers up front.
It requires deep humility. The optimist delusion is basically just arrogance. We think we are Steve Jobs, and we know what the customer wants before they do. But remember, even Steve Jobs had massive flops. Lean is the antidote to that arrogance. It forces you to fall in love with the problem, not your specific solution.
But there's also a danger on the other side, isn't there? The HBR article warns about pivoting too much.
Yes, the pivot-happy founder. If you just react to every single piece of random feedback, you end up moving in circles. You become a feature factory, just adding whatever the last person asked for.
Which goes back to the lean strategy concept. You need those bounds.
Exactly. You need to say, we are exploring solutions for this specific market. If the data says that market doesn't exist, then maybe you abandon the whole thing. But you don't just drift aimlessly from idea to idea.
So for the listener who is sitting on an idea right now, maybe you're sketching it on a napkin or thinking about coding it this weekend, let's make this highly actionable. What is the synthesis of all this research? What should they do instead of opening their code editor?
Stop building. Put down the keyboard. Step away from the IDE.
Okay, step 1 is stop.
Step 2, write down your hypotheses. Use the business model canvas or just a blank sheet of paper. Who is it for? What is the actual problem? How do you make money?
Got it. Step 3.
Identify the riskiest assumption. What is the one thing that, if it's false, kills the entire business? Usually it's simply, people actually want this.
Not can I build it, but do they want it?
And step 4, pick a prototype from Glueski's list. A landing page, a slide deck, a manual Wizard of Oz service, and go test that riskiest assumption in under 48 hours.
48 hours? That's a tight timeline.
If it takes longer than that, you're probably over-engineering it. You're building a product, not a test.
And what if the test fails?
Then you celebrate. You just save yourself months of your life and thousands of dollars. You learned. Then you pivot or you iterate.
It's funny, looking at all these sources, the common thread is really about the speed of learning versus the speed of building.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The unit of progress in a startup isn't lines of code written or features shipped. It is validated learning.
I want to leave the listeners with one final image that Steve Blank shared, which I think sums this entire philosophy up perfectly. It's about the agricultural robot.
Oh, the weed-pulling robot. I love this story. It perfectly encapsulates the concierge MVP.
So this team wanted to build a robot that could autonomously identify weeds versus crops. We're talking complex computer vision, autonomous driving, expensive hardware. They told Steve, we need $1 year and $1 million to build the prototype.
And Steve, being Steve, said absolutely not.
He told them to put the camera sensors on a cart and drag it through the mud by hand.
A manual cart.
And they did. They dragged this thing through the fields themselves. They proved the camera could spot the weeds in the dirt and dust. They validated the core tech list without building the actual robot.
If you can validate a high-tech agricultural robot by dragging a cart through the mud, you have absolutely no excuse for waiting 6 months to launch your app idea.
That is the ultimate takeaway. Stop building, start learning.
Get out of the building.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into the Lion's Share podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, share it with a friend and join us next time for more ideas worth talking about. We'll see you next time.